Welcome to the House Church lesson for Kids Village this week. I'm excited to share with you another story about David from the Bible. Let's review just a little bit of what we've learned so far about David. Is David's story found in the Old Testament or in the New Testament? These stories about David are found in the Old Testament. That's in the front half of my Bible. So that's this side on mine. What else can we remember about David? These stories were written by Samuel. And what book are they in? They're in the book of 1 Samuel in our Bibles. Samuel was a prophet and a leader that shared what God had told him with other people around him. Who was David in our stories? David has been a shepherd. What kind of animals did David take care of? Did he take care of dogs? Did he take care of chickens? No. David took care of the sheep. That's what he did to help his family. How many brothers did David have? Did David have 3 brothers? No. Did David have 10 brothers? No. David had 7 older brothers. David's dad, Jesse, had 8 sons altogether. Did God love David because he was the strongest? No. Did God love David because he was the tallest guy he had ever seen? No. God loved David because of what was on the inside of David's heart and how much David loved God. Last week in our story, there was a big, tall guy. Do you remember his name? He had a sword. He screamed ugly things about God. He wore a helmet on his head. What was his name? David ended up killing him to be the hero to the Israelite people. That big guy's name was Goliath. Do you remember that story? Yes, last week was David and Goliath from 1 Samuel 17. This week we're going to be in 1 Samuel 18, and we learn about a new guy named Jonathan. So this week we'll have King Saul. We'll still talk about David, and then we meet King Saul's son named Jonathan. I'm fixing to read to you from my Bible. I'm going to read the verses that have this week's story. But before we do that, I want to just check in with you. Did you get something in the mail this week? If you did it come in an envelope? And it was papers that looked like this? Mine has 2 pieces of paper. They're coloring pages. And I have stickers. We're going to use these for a project that goes with our Bible story. So if you have these pages, you can color these. It's a coloring page. This is the one that's going to come first in our story, so let me tell you about it first. This is David and Jonathan, and it says they were friends. And we'll hear more about that from our Bible verses, but David and Jonathan were friends. So when I'm talking about the Bible story and I'm reading the verses, you can use these smiley face stickers to put on this coloring page because they were friends. Friends make us smile. We love our friends and we take care of our friends. And we're going to hear about how David and Jonathan were great friends. Then on this other piece of paper, this is another picture of David. He looks a little bit different. And this guy doesn't look very friendly. It's actually King Saul, Jonathan's dad. But this is not friendly faces that we have going on here. Jealousy or envy is when you want something so bad that somebody else has that it just makes you mad because you want it so bad. It makes you mad at that other person. So it's not kind of us to be jealous, and we're not supposed to be jealous or green with envy. So when I talk about that in the Bible story, think about this picture in Saul's face, how he's mad and not happy, and we're going to put the green stickers on that page because Saul was green with envy about what David was doing. And that wasn't nice of him. So let me get started, and I'm going to read our Bible verses for today. In my Bible, I'm in 1 Samuel 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. So that is what's going on in this coloring page. Jonathan was giving David his stuff because they were such good friends. He wanted to take care of him. Whatever Saul sent him to do, David did it so successfully that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs, and with tambourines and lutes. As they danced, they sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Saul was very angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. There was that word again, jealous. When King Saul was jealous of what David had, with the people and how everybody else felt about David, it made King Saul so jealous. So here's our coloring page, and here's our stickers to remind us that King Saul was so jealous of David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully upon Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the harp. Do you remember? He's done that before. As he usually did. David had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, "I'll pin David to the wall." But David eluded him twice. David was running away because Saul was being so mean. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him a command over 1,000 men, and David led the troops into their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was even more afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. There's just a few more verses to finish chapter 18. But it just reminds us that Saul was not happy with David. But God was very happy and pleased with David. David loved God so much. We want to be like David. We want to love God with everything we have. It doesn't matter how tall we are or how strong we are. It just matters that we love God. Because of David's love for God, Saul and his armies were not able to keep David down. David won every single time with the help of God. Next week, we're going to learn about Samuel, so we're going to go back just a few chapters and start in the beginning of 1 Samuel. Have a great week.